Welcome to Miami Television News. I'm Isabella Olivas.
And I'm Cordelia Stubblefield, and we have the honor of interviewing Rosalind Wiseman today.
She's the best-selling author of Queen Bees and Wannabes, helping your daughter survive cliques, gossip, boyfriends, and the new realities of Girl World, which is the basis for the 2004 movie Mean Girls.
In 2022, she published Courageous Discomfort, How to Have Brave, Life-Changing Conversations About Race and Racism, and she was awarded Best Parenting Book by Books for Better Life for her New Rules of Boy World. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
What inspired you to write Queen Bees and Wannabes?
Well, I was teaching young people what is now called social emotional learning, but we didn't have a name for it at the time. And I was really blown away by how people did not understand that what was happening to girls and their friendships and their social lives was important to them, and the women that they would become. And the other part that I was really struck by is that adults tend to give advice to young people, but don't ask about young people's lives before they give advice. And I felt like it was probably better if you actually ask people about the context of their lives before you start lecturing to them.
Makes perfect sense. Queen Bees and Wannabes was published in 2002. Then 10 years later, Masterminds and Wingman, which is another book of yours, was published in 2013. Did you have the concept or idea to write Masterminds and Wingman around the same time as Queen Bees and Wannabes? Or did the inspiration for that book come much later?
So I've actually always worked with boys and girls and young people in equal numbers. But because I wrote this book, Queen Bees and Wannabes, and it became this massive success, and then Mean Girls came out and it became an even larger success, people had this feeling that I had just written about, that I just had worked with girls. And there was also this thing of focusing on girls and their friendships as if the lives of boys, the emotional lives of boys and friendships with boys was not important to them. And I felt like we needed to do a similar thing that I had done with girls, which is to show the emotional and social lives of boys. Now, just like with girls, but I certainly would not have done this with the boys' book particularly, especially, was I always have young people help me when I'm writing a book. It is not, I don't do like, oh, here's a focus group and I'm just gonna take information from you and then I'm gonna like write about it. I actually have always had young people, whoever I'm writing about, read what I'm writing and tell me where I'm wrong, or tell me what I need to do differently, or what I need to add. And so with Masterminds and Wingmen, I had about 150 boys and young men help me write that book.
Oh, wow. For those unfamiliar with your book, Queen Bees and Wannabes, what social topics do you focus on in teenage girls?
Well, I've rewritten that book 3 times, and I've written 9 books total. And you know, what I did with Queen Bees is I created a taxonomy, a way of labeling group behavior. And that's always really tricky because labels can be helpful in the way in which they can give you more insight into why you are behaving the way you are behaving, or understanding a social landscape in front of you. But I never created a taxonomy so that people could say like, oh, that person's this and that person's that, or like, for example, parents to label kids who are going through their adolescent development and their development as human beings, like, oh, that's that kid, right? Mm-hmm. And pathologizing them and demonizing them. And that's really the real crux, like that's the real hardship sometimes of labels, is that it gives us words to behavior, and that can be empowering, and it can be like identifying for people of this is who I am, which is incredibly important, and I can put it down when it no longer suits me. And labels can help us understand the world around us, but at the same time, for that very same reason, it can also limit us. So when I created the taxonomy for Queen Bees and Wannabes, it was a way for people to understand social dynamics better. The thing that it was not was to label people so they could never get out of it, and in some ways objectify them, right? Like labeling somebody as a queen bee. So it's really important to me when I'm doing this work that the understanding of sort of the larger concepts here of, for example, when you are a young person, what you learn in your friendship group carries with you for the rest of your life about how you express yourself when you're upset with somebody, when someone's transgressing a personal boundary, when you have to stand up to somebody that's a friend of yours and you don't want to make things awkward, but they're doing something that's really wrong. How do you stand up? When do you sacrifice your personal boundaries? Why should you? When should you not? All of these questions are extraordinarily important, not only for our individual development, but literally for like our political participation. So it goes from like individual behavior and friendships to our democracy. is how do people operate in groups? And how do they speak truth to power? And how do we listen to people when they are saying things that we don't want to hear, especially when those people might not have as much power, and so it's easy to dismiss them. Like, how does that work, and what do we need to do to stop it? And how do we create community, knowing these dynamics can be so powerful? And so those are the issues, actually, that are underlying both of those books, of Queen Bees and Wannabes and Masterminds and Wingmen. So they sort of masquerade as like how-to books for parents, but they're actually really about like, how do we operate as human beings with each other?
Yeah.
Would the content in Queen Bees and Wannabes have been much different, do you think, if you had written it, say, today, perhaps? And what things would it have consisted of? Exactly. Do you think it would have been the same, perhaps, maybe in some situations?
Yeah, I think that there are some evergreen issues, actually, right? Like having a best friend and that best friend not wanting to be your best friend anymore, you know, or how important friendships are to people. That's evergreen. Feeling comparison to other people and feeling lacking, evergreen. Wanting to tell your parents things, maybe if you have a healthy, functioning family, but you're scared to because you don't want them taking over. These are things like we've all maybe lying to your parents and getting caught. Like, absolutely, these are things that like all generations, right? Falling in love, being betrayed, breakups. I mean, all these things. But certainly now, because people have no privacy, basically, and you have to work, let's say at best, you have to work really hard to maintain privacy and assume that you will not have it, that, of course, going through all of these processes without that sense of privacy and without the sense of, I get to make mistakes without other people commenting on it, I think is incredibly difficult. And it really is the case that young people are growing up in a different world today. And so I think that adults have, you know, I don't think we have any business saying to people that are your age, I know what it's like to be in college today. I don't think we have the right to say that. I think we actually have the right to say, actually, I don't know what it's like to be in college today, and I'd really like to know. So if you trust me to tell me, I'd really like to listen. And I think that's what we need to be doing a lot more on this end, because we do not know what it is like to grow up today. And we really need to listen before, you know, I think that people that are older have wisdom and they have important things to share, but we have to listen to the context before we give any advice that would make sense.
Yeah. How involved were you in the process of creating Mean Girls? What did that look like for you?
Well, it looked at first like, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, this seems like a cool idea.
Right.
And you know, before I said yes to Tina Fey and to Paramount, I had said no to a lot of people, to a number of people. And so I was a technical consultant on the script and on the original movie, and I helped with some of the things with the musical. I have nothing to do with the third one. You know, I really am an educator and a teacher by training. And although someone did say to me at a speech last week, they said to me afterwards, I loved your speech. You were funny. Did you know that you're funny? I was like, what do I do with that? I'm not really sure, like, you know, like I'm glad you think I'm funny and thank you very much, right? Like you have to say thank,
yeah.
But it was the oddest thing of like, did you know? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I think generally find like some things in my work are very, very sad. And as actually a student here was just asking me about this right before this and asking if it was like soul crushing. And I was like, yes, I do have a lot of soul crushing moments. And I also have moments where I just have to laugh because things are so absurd that all you can do is just laugh. Like you have to have moments of inappropriate laughing, of like, I don't know what to do with this. I need a moment of just releasing because it's just too much. It's too much. So all of that contributes to like, you know, how I do my work and sort of my involvement in Mean Girls and the things that I choose to be involved in and not involved in today.
Yeah.
You expressed in a New York Times article, When Mean Girls Grow Up, that there's still much work to be done to solve the social conditioning that women experience in our culture today. Is there anything that you witnessed today that you think is effectively combating this issue?
Combating it. I think that there are wonderful things that are supporting women in their professional lives to address some of the legacy issues that we have. So when we grow up, we really learn, for better and for worse, about how to navigate conflict. And conflict is absolutely inevitable. And so we learn to be quiet, or we learn to advocate, or how to advocate around, lots of different, very complex social dynamics of how we are allowed to express our anger or our frustration, and how people receive that also can be very culturally impacted by like who the person is who's expressing the anger and who is the person that's receiving it. And there's lots of wonderful things out there about how to help people do that. I'm doing work with adults on all different throughout the age ranges of how do we manage to build capacity around managing conflict, because people are struggling so hard to have basic, like, decent conflicts with each other, and then they're freaking out about it. And conflict is inevitable, and we have to be capable about it. We just have to. I mean, we can be incapable of it, but then look what happens. We're sort of in the situation we're in, which people freak out. And we really actually have the capacity to just disagree with each other and be able to not have self-righteous temper tantrums about it. It's so boring to have self-righteous temper tantrums, or it's also equally boring to hang out with people that only agree with you about everything.
Yeah.
And also, I don't think people actually really agree with each other about everything. I think we actually get to a place of groupthink where people are too scared in their groups to actually say what they really feel.
Yeah, I agree with you. What are some more modern social issues that young girls face today?
Well, first of all, I would ask you. I sort of want to turn the tables on you and ask you about that. I'm actually...
Social media, not to be cliche.
Yeah. Well, no, it can be true and cliche, right? I do think that a lot of the issues of comparison are amplified with social media. So I don't know if you agree with me about that, but it's not just like the cute girl in the bikini pic. It's not that. It's also, the other thing that freaks me out is like the homogeneity of everything, right? So on Instagram, I mean, we can laugh about it, but like, where did it come that all girls know the particular poses that they have to do on Instagram, right? Like on the beach, like in the bikini top with like the jeans, like with her stretching and like who said that?
Right.
Who went around and told girls that that's what they had to do? Or like take a picture of their food at some cute bar and take a picture with their friends, like all smiling in particular ways. Like, it was like somebody went around and told girls that they all had to be the same. And that is such a bummer. It's such a bummer that we all have to like look, like even the postures are the same, and women do the same thing. It's not like just college women are doing it. And one of the things that freaks me out a lot is that I have high school girls tell me that they think TikTok has impacted middle school girls so that you go from 12 to 18 with like no awkward phases.
Absolutely.
Right? Like where is the understandable and like the awkward phase when you are like in a mid-range adolescent? So 12-year-olds really look like 18-year-olds because they're looking at like, Pinterest or looking at the tutorials, the YouTube tutorials regularly. 14-year-olds. It's like really hard for me when I'm in high school to be like, how did you do your makeup?
Additionally, too, because they're also competing with older women now because they have access to see what the older women are doing on
Totally.
social media. And so, I can do this when I'm 12 years old. So they're not really competing with their age group anymore. They're looking at the older generations and seeing what they're doing as well.
Right. So like no awkward phase, sorta, right? But you're going to feel awkward on the inside, and everyone sort of looks the same. Like, right? I mean, it's just. Oh my gosh! I mean, I could go on about this forever. I mean, really, like the lip syncing on.
The dancing,
right?
And the dancing, right, but like the lip syncing of like, I mean, and here's the thing: is how much risk is that when you're in all seriousness? So you post something because it's supposed to express something about yourself, and so you lip sync to a song. So you're not singing because that's way too scary, unless you're really, really, really good, right? Okay, different thing. But you're lip syncing. And then you're literally doing, and the algorithm for TikTok, of course, loves it and then posts it everywhere, so that all of a sudden now your feed is flooded with lip syncing girls that basically look all the same, no matter what ethnic demographic they are. It's just, see, it's like, it's sort of laughable, but it's really not. Like when I get across my TikTok feed, like like just thing after thing of girls lip
It's just the
syncing.
same,
You're like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
like I had a really, really horrible, like awkward middle school phase. And on TikTok, it's like these 12-year-olds are going to Lululemon
I know.
and Sephora.
I know.
Who let you into the Sephora?
I know. And they can do their they can do their eyeshadow and their like cat eye and all that stuff way better than I can. It is
Yeah.
so hard for me not to say to a 14-year-old, like, can you teach me how to do that?
Exactly.
Like I seriously, they're talking to me about their skincare routine, which is sort of good and like sort of really disturbing at the same time. So it's a lot.
Well, we
It's a
really
lot.
appreciate you and people like you as well addressing these topics, and we're so grateful to have you here today at Miami.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure.
Once again, I'm Isabella.
I'm Cordelia.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Miami Television News. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at MiamiMTN.